Good evening and welcome. Tonight we are going to be flipping through this book about Iraq. We're going to look at all the pictures and read all the little boxes. And just a warning, there are some kind of distressing wartime topics brought up. It doesn't get too graphic, so don't worry, but those kind of things upset you, viewer discretion is advised. I'll be sure to warn you ahead of time before it comes up. Iraq. Isn't this a beautiful headdress here? Let's see what we've got. Some very sweet faces here. Very cute. Love the smiles. Here's some old Mesopotamian kind of wall art of this vicious lion. And I assume it's like a king or a hunter grabbing him by the throat. Some of the land of the Fertile Crescent. And it says this girl's holding up a sign supporting a new personal status law that would restrict women's rights. Let's see, this is Baghdad from above. You can see the Tigris River flowing on through. This says it's Duhok up in Kurdistan, the northern region, as you can tell by all the mountains. Really beautiful cliffside buildings. A canyon here, also up in the north. Really cool. And this is a Marsh Arab family, I suppose. So down in the south, I think it'll talk about it more, but these people live on the marshes and they build these beautiful reed boats. That takes a lot of work. I'm sure that is fantastic. Let's see, we've got some stone buildings here in the Zagros Mountains. And it has flooded in Baghdad, and he's getting around by boat. What do we have here? Getting some reeds from the marshes. Let's read about how civilization began here. Early humans first migrated out of Africa into Asia probably between 2 million and 1.8 million years ago. For hundreds of thousands of years, they lived as hunter-gatherers, finding their food in nature and wandering in search of more food and shelter as conditions changed. In this way, the earliest people eventually spread across the globe. It wasn't until groups of people learned to grow their own food and had to stay in one place from one season to the next to harvest what they had sown that civilization arose. As larger groups of people lived together in one place, individuals had to learn specialized tasks. People had to learn cooperation and planning. With that came a hierarchy of power. Someone had to give the orders. Others had to carry out those orders. Social status emerged, and rules were established. Rules became laws. Records had to be kept, and numbering and writing systems developed in order to keep them. People made music and art, told stories, and developed rituals and belief systems. They domesticated animals, built houses, and made objects. Trade developed, and money systems were created. Villages grew and became urban centers. All of this didn't happen overnight. It didn't even happen over the course of a few years or generations. Civilization was a very gradual process spurred by the need to survive. Archaeological excavations of the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in the south of today's Iraq began in the 1840s CE. Those digs revealed ruined buildings, clay tablets, and pottery from the ancient Sumerian civilization dating to 3500 BCE. These were the remains of the world's oldest cities, Eridu, Uruk, Lagash, and Nippur. Looks like a big ziggurat here a big old temple. Here's a crane, or stork actually. It's got some material for a nest. And another picture of Baghdad along the Tigris River. And this is the Shat al-Arab, which is where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers meet. Very big shipping port. I love this tower. This is in Samarra. And this is its big minaret. It spirals up and up and up to the top. It is so beautiful. And here we can see some ruins of Babylon. Very, very ancient, powerful city. It says this is a winged genie from Assyria. That's really cool. And they are on top of the ruins of Borsippa. They look very excited to have climbed the summit. Let's read about Shia and Sunni Muslims. And yes, someone has edited parts of the book, but they're not really that wrong. Let's see what it says. In the religion of Islam, there are two main denominations, Sunni and Shia. In the Muslim world and in most Muslim countries, Sunnis make up the majority. In Iraq, however, Shia Muslims or Shiites are the most populous. The difference between the two factions dates to 632 CE, the year the Prophet Muhammad died in, this person edited to say Hijaz. It's Saudi Arabia, but that's how it was known then, and I assume it was in the Hijaz region. Muhammad is the founder of Islam. After the Prophet died, there was disagreement among his followers as to who should succeed him. This dispute eventually led to the formation of the two branches of Islam. All Muslims believe there is one God, Allah, and that Muhammad was Allah's messenger and last prophet. They believe the Quran, Islam's holy book, to be the divine word of Allah, as revealed to Muhammad. However, the two sects have different religious interpretations, traditions, and customs. These differences also occasionally translate into political conflicts. And it says, for the sake of understanding, the two branches of Islam can be broadly compared to the various sects of Christianity, like Roman Catholicism and Protestantism, or even the various Protestant sects. Basically, a split in religion, right? Same religion, different splinters of it. In Iraq, the Sunni have traditionally held power, even though the Shiites make up the majority. After the fall of Saddam Hussein, this discrepancy of power fueled political turmoil that has on occasion erupted into violence. After the death of Saddam and during the U.S. occupation, sectarian hostility calmed and Iraq began to put itself back together. However, since 2013-2014, when this book was published, bloodshed and bombings have once again become more prevalent. I know they've tried to fix this by making certain positions in the military, the government has to be filled by a Shia. Like a certain position has to be filled by a Sunni, certain positions be filled by a Kurd, so on and so forth. But yeah, King Faisal II and Saddam Hussein, kind of like the two different aspects of rule in Iraq in the 20th century. We've got fighting here during the Iraq-Iran War, and oil fields in Kuwait being burnt by retreating Iraqi soldiers. Now here's where it's going to get a little depressing, because we're going to talk about the sad tale of the Baghdad Zoo. And again, this doesn't get too graphic or depressing. It's actually like the least depressing description of what happened at the Baghdad Zoo that I've ever read. And like the person who edited this book said that these tigers are very beautiful, which I agree. So let's read it. Just know that there will be some distressed animals in this, so please skip to the next part if you need to, okay? It's fine. You don't have to listen to it if you don't want to hear it. When war came to Baghdad in 2003, it brought death, destruction, and deep suffering to the helpless inhabitants of the city zoo. In some ways, the sad tale of what happened at the Baghdad Zoo is a metaphor for the story of Iraq itself. The 200-acre Baghdad Zoo had been the largest zoo in the Middle East, home to more than 600 animals. However, conditions at the zoo were poor. By modern standards, the animal enclosures were small and inadequate. Many were merely cages with bars and concrete floors. Economic sanctions in the years leading up to the 2003 invasion had seriously impacted the zookeepers' abilities to buy food and medicines for the animals. Even before the US-led forces arrived in Baghdad, troops loyal to Saddam Hussein took up defensive positions in the zoo itself. The dangerous situation forced the zookeepers to stay away, and the animals were left alone, locked in their cages and fed and dying of thirst. Meanwhile, people in Baghdad were starving as well, and looters broke into the abandoned zoo. They stole many of the animals and ate them, including the zoo's 2 giraffes. Then the real fighting started. A mortar attack hit the lion enclosure, leaving a gaping hole in the wall. A couple of starving lions escaped, and one attacked a horse. A brown bear escaped into the city and killed 3 Iraqis. U.S. soldiers tried to round up the wandering animals, including a baboon that had found its way into the desert. But by then, only 35 animals remained alive in the Baghdad Zoo. South African conservationist Lawrence Anthony rushed to Baghdad. There he worked with U.S. Army Captain William Sumner to rescue, protect, and rehabilitate the animals and the zoo itself. International conservation organizations worked with them, and the zoo reopened 3 months later with 86 animals, including many found at Hussein family compounds and private zoos. Today, the zoo has grown. It has 1,000 animals of 70 species, many of them donated from other zoos around the world. The story of the zoo has inspired several books, including Babylon's Ark, The Incredible Wartime Rescue of the Baghdad Zoo by Lawrence Anthony and Graham Spence, and a play, Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo by Rajiv Joseph, which premiered in 2009. This guy's waving his flag. He says he's demonstrating to end corruption. One of Saddam Hussein's luxurious palaces, and here he is at a meeting. This is Baghdad 2003, when the US and their coalition forces invaded, and a medical tank going by there. Alright, so some more nasty wartime stuff. This is going to talk about Saddam Hussein, if you can't tell by the picture, and his untidy death. So again, if you don't want to hear this, if this is not relaxing for you, please go and skip ahead to the next page. It's fine. You don't feel like you have to listen to it if you don't want to. So what happened to Saddam Hussein? When US-led forces entered Baghdad in April 2003, the tyrant, his family, and most senior Iraqi government officials had all disappeared. For the United States, finding Saddam became a top priority, and the military set about rounding up anyone who might know his whereabouts. Occasionally, Saddam would issue audio tapes in which he called on Iraqis to defy the occupying forces, but he stayed hidden. After months of gathering information, on December 13th, 2003, U.S. operatives descended on a farmhouse near Tikrit in a dramatic raid called Operation Red Dawn. Inside a shack on the property, they found a rough underground chamber, essentially a man-sized hole in the ground. Lying inside it was a bearded and disheveled Saddam Hussein. He was armed with a pistol and an AK-47 assault rifle, and he had a large amount of cash in US dollars. He put up no resistance. The following summer, the Supreme Iraqi Criminal Tribunal charged Saddam with crimes against humanity. Specific charges included the murder of 148 people, the torture of women and children, and the illegal arrest of 399 others, all having to do with one specific incident in 1982. However, Saddam was alleged to be responsible for many other crimes, including the deaths of thousands of political rivals, the use of chemical weapons against the Kurdish population, resulting in some 50,000 to 100,000 deaths, the draining of the marshes in southern Iraq in a largely successful attempt to destroy the livelihoods of the Marsh Arabs, the invasion of Kuwait and the torching of more than 700 oil wells there, and the deliberate release of a huge quantity of oil into the Persian Gulf. Saddam was found guilty, and on December 30th, 2006, he was hanged. In a final blow to the tyrant who had once lived in opulent palaces, Saddam was sent to his death by poorly behaved guards who insulted him and filmed him with their cell phones. Yeah, don't look up videos of that. Here's a statue being ripped off its pedestal of Saddam. And let's read about how the government takes shape. And remember, this book came out about 10 years ago, so things are a little different now, but this is still pretty accurate. Under the current constitution, Iraq's federal government is defined as an Islamic, democratic, federal, parliamentary republic. So a lot of words to describe. It is composed of 3 branches: the executive, legislative, and judicial, as well as numerous independent commissions. The executive branch is composed of the president, the prime minister, and the council of ministers. In 2010, Iraq had held parliamentary elections deciding the 325 members of the Council of Representatives of Iraq, made up of a coalition composed largely of members of 4 main political parties, as well as some representatives of minority parties. This council then elected the prime minister and president. Incumbent Nouri al-Maliki was chosen to continue on as prime minister and head of the government. During the reign of Saddam Hussein, al-Maliki was a Shiite dissident who lived in exile from Iraq from 1979 to 2003, returning when Hussein was overthrown. Incumbent Jalal Talabani was chosen to continue as president of Iraq and head of state. A leading Kurdish politician, Talabani is the first non-Arab president of Iraq. Al-Maliki's government is credited with working with the United States toward the withdrawal of U.S. troops, which was largely accomplished in 2011, and with greatly boosting oil production. However, it has been accused of corruption, failing to hem in al-Qaeda and Shiite dissident violence, human rights abuses, and failure to alleviate widespread poverty in Iraq. Yeah, I know they had a major election, I think, in 2022, so, you know, political times always change. Some buildings that were damaged during the invasion and wars. We're gonna skip this poem. It's a nice poem, but I don't think it contributes much to learning more about Iraq. And there's some militants there in Fallujah. Look at all these melons. Oh my gosh. Who loves watermelons? Let me know in the comments. Sound off, watermelon army. I could eat like a whole watermelon. They are so good. This guy's working on the oil refinery. And then look at all of these dates as well. And this guy's got a bunch of fruit. And let's see, there's a big hydroelectric dam here. There's a brick maker. Look, at very dusty. Oh, that must be so uncomfortable. Look how dusty they are. And a big old train. It says the Baghdad Central Station was badly damaged during the war. That makes sense, doesn't it? Okay, animal in distress. Just a warning. We've got a seabird covered in oil. That's very, very sad. But we're gonna skip that. There's also a bunch of litter here in the Chateau Arabs, which is also very distressing. Little boys poking through some unexploded tank shells, which again, big yikes. And abandoned tanks out in the wilderness. And oil damaging this oasis, it looks like, and an oil well fire. Yeah, this is not a very happy chapter, but let's read about the formerly wet world of the Marsh Arabs. And just to note that the conditions there are like way better today. But let's read about what the book says about the Marsh Arabs. Iraq's Delta region was once a vast, lush wetlands. This is where the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers split into rivulets, streams, and lakes as they flow into the Persian Gulf. Some people think this valley is the location of the biblical Garden of Eden, or the inspiration for the mythical place, as described in both the Bible and the Quran. Some say it could be the site of the Great Flood, for which Noah built his ark, and the place where the patriarch Abraham was born. Whatever one's belief about these stories, be they history or allegory, it's clear that the Mesopotamian marshland region plays an important role in the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These marshlands have supported human communities and wildlife for 5,000 years. They are the ancestral home of Iraq's Marsh Arabs, or Madan people, the cultural descendants of the ancient Sumerian and Babylonian civilizations. Until their world literally drained away, these people lived in much the same way as their ancient ancestors, raising water buffalo, sheep, and cattle, and fishing in the plentiful waters. The marshlands are also a wintering stop for migratory birds and a breeding spot for local animals, some of which have become extinct with the shrinking of their natural habitat. Then Saddam Hussein's regime embarked on a series of large-scale hydro-engineering projects with no regard for the environmental and human damage it would cause. More than 30 large dams were constructed over 40 years. Massive drainage works in the 1990s were Saddam's retaliation against the Marsh Arabs for political insurrection. The marshlands shrunk from 7,700 square miles to less than 770 square miles, more than 90%, leaving behind cracked earth. Many scientists have described the situation as one of the world's greatest environmental disasters. It was also a human disaster, as the Madan people suffered and scattered, leaving behind their old ways. After the fall of Saddam in 2003, the international community jumped in to help reestablish the historic marshes, but full restoration may not be possible. And it looks like outside a hospital here. There's a very old man. He's Kurdish, he says. And they're in the marshes watching the cattle. We've got some camels here having a big old feast or a drink. And let's see. It doesn't say what city this is, but I would assume it's Baghdad. Just showing off the type of buildings that people live in the cities and what people live in the more rural areas. Says this is near Turkey. It's a Kurdish woman there. And some more Kurdish people here. And there's a teacher beginner class. These people here are praying. It's showing off their headwear. I guess that's a good angle to look at headwear, isn't it? And a tailor sewing an abaya. And a woman with her daughter. Very cute. Oh, what a beautiful smile. She's got some radishes. But that is an absolutely lovely little face, isn't it? It's a wedding. Looks like a big old bridal party here for the beautiful bride. And we're working hard in school at this girls' school. And they're working hard at university. It's a College of Medicine in Basra. Beautiful mosque. This is in Erbil. That is lovely, isn't it? And this is a Jewish prayer book, it says, in Hebrew. Alright, Journey to Mecca, which I'm going to skip this part, to be honest. There's Mecca right here. It's in Saudi Arabia. I mean, the Hajj is very important to Iraqi culture, especially to all the Muslims there, of course, but that doesn't really have to do with Iraqi, like, history or culture or anything. Quran and the Bible. Okay, let's read this box. If we skip one, we can read this one. The Quran and the Bible. Among the major world religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are most closely related. There are distinct differences among the three faiths, but also notable similarities. Christianity and Judaism share the books of the Old Testament in the Christian Bible. Islam and Christianity share several beliefs, including the existence of both heaven and hell, the birth of Jesus Christ to a virgin, Mary, and Jesus' ability to perform miracles. Both the Quran and the Bible describe the story of the creation of the human race in the first man and woman, Adam and Eve. Both holy books emphasize the importance of faith in God and talk about the Day of Judgment. Which, by the way, that's how we spell judgment in America. We're the only country that spells it that way. Both faiths share prophets such as Adam, Noah, Abraham, and Moses. However, a major difference between Islam and Christianity, perhaps the most significant difference, is the identity of Jesus. While Muslims believe that Jesus was a prophet, Christians believe that he was the Son of God made flesh, God and man at the same time. Nonetheless, Muslims believe that Islam belongs to the same root of faith as do Christianity and Judaism. Indeed, a close comparison of the Quran, the Bible, and the Tanakh, or the Jewish Bible, reveal the common foundations on which the three faiths are built. Again, nothing to do with Iraq specifically, but I mean, and there's a church there, Chaldean Christian Church in Kurdistan. Looks kind of like an old ziggurat. It's pretty cool. Here is some cuneiform, which was the oldest written language that we have translated. How cool is that? And here's the Cyrus cylinder with lots of information about Cyrus the Great from Persia. Got some street signs here. You can see that it's in Arabic and English. And let's talk about some body language. Nonverbal communication is an important part of interpersonal interaction in Iraq. Gestures and facial expressions may convey thoughts and feelings that are not expressed in words, or may confirm the meaning of something that has been said. Iraqis use their eyes and hands as they speak to emphasize a point. In a conversation, Iraqis often stand closer to each other and touch each other on the arms more often than people from many Western cultures ordinarily do. Yeah, in my Western culture, if you're talking to someone and they grab your arm, it's usually not a good thing. But here it's very, like, connecting, right? Traditionally, Iraqis also hold hands when talking to someone of the same sex, even if they are virtual strangers. Women generally do not use gestures as much as men do. Iraqis greet people with a lot of enthusiasm. Members of the same sex kiss each other on the cheek or embrace each other. However, members of the opposite sex greet without physical contact. Even married couples traditionally avoid showing affection through gestures when they greet each other in public. A few universal Arab gestures and their meanings include 1. When an Iraqi, or any Muslim for that matter, places his or her right hand over the heart after shaking hands with you, the person is expressing sincerity. 2. A raised fist with an extended thumb is a sign of victory. Isn't that just like a thumbs up? Number 3, holding the right hand out, palm facing down, and moving it up and down means be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. Number 4, moving the forefinger of the right hand from right to left means no, or don't do that. Other signs that mean a negative response include raising the eyebrows and tilting the head back and making clicking sounds with the tongue. Number 5, holding the right hand out while opening and closing the palm means come here. Moving the right hand palm facing down away from the body means go away. Let's see what we've got here. A coffee shop. Some beautiful, beautiful carpets and rugs. Some cool murals here. Look, they painted Iraq there. This is the Ishtar Gate, which was the grand entrance to Babylon. Now, people, by that I mean like archaeologists, took it apart bit by bit and sent it off to Germany where it's on display. They've built a new one in the spot where it was, but the actual original gate is still in Germany. And here are some warriors here. It says that's on the Ishtar Gate. A little art festival outside. And let's read about the looting of the National Museum of Iraq. Also some distressing war stuff. Again, if you need to skip the war stuff, I don't blame you. Feel free to skip ahead to the next page. When Baghdad fell to U.S. forces on April 2003, the city erupted into chaos. Jubilant Iraqis took to the streets to celebrate the fall of Saddam Hussein. A sense of lawlessness quickly descended, however, and the scene becomes one of crazed destruction. Gangs of revelers demolished all symbols of the Hussein regime. They invaded government buildings and homes of government officials, stealing furniture, appliances, and supplies of all sorts. They looted stores and factories. However, things turned ugly, as they often do in such chaotic situations. Mobs ransacked the National Museum of Iraq, the country's world-class museum of art and antiquities. Looters stole priceless artifacts, many dating from the dawn of civilization, about 15,000 objects in all. The museum staff tried to protect the collections, but were overrun and forced to abandon the building. The U.S. was sharply criticized for not protecting the museum. Most looters were average, poorly educated citizens caught up in the frenzy of the moment. Many saw no difference between taking artwork and taking an air conditioner from a government office building. Both items belonged to the hated government, and ultimately they reasoned to the people. But some of the bandits were professional art thieves who had clearly been preparing for just this occasion. They knew the plan of the building and went directly for the most treasured items, bypassing less valuable objects. Most of the museum's 170,000 items were eventually found to be safe, having been locked away and hidden by the staff. And more than a quarter of these stolen objects have been recovered. Nevertheless, more than 10 years after the looting, the museum is far from restored. It remains closed to the public and opens only by appointment. I think that's not true anymore. I think it opened a couple years ago. The existing staff, those who did not flee the country, lack the expertise to evaluate, identify, and repair the artifacts. Despite the international community's desire to help revitalize the museum, ongoing violence in Iraq has kept away many experts from other countries. This little guy here is playing an oud, traditional instrument. It's at a school concert, it says. That's really sweet. This guy here is making some big old clay pots here. It says he's making a baking stove. Very cool. And this is from Nippur, the ancient Mesopotamian city. This is an old temple. How neat is that? You can see that there's still stuff to be excavated down here. How exciting. Let's read about rebuilding Babylon. Some 25,000 historic cities are thought to lie under the ground in Iraq, although less than 10% have been excavated. One of the most famous is the 4,000-year-old city of Babylon, which reached the height of its splendor in the 6th and 7th centuries BCE. During the time of King Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon was the largest city in the world, covering about 4 square miles. Nebuchadnezzar II lived in a 700-room palace surrounded by the famous Hanging Gardens and a maze of canals. In the center of the ancient city stood the great ziggurat of Marduk, which was possibly the biblical Tower of Babel. The ruins of Babylon straddle the Euphrates River 55 miles south of Baghdad. The city had a wide bridge connecting the two banks of the river. It was surrounded by a long, thick wall and was guarded by the Ishtar Gate. The wall and the Hanging Gardens are 2 of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, as described by the Greeks centuries later. The first serious excavations of Babylon were conducted in the 19th century and continued off and on until World War I in 1917. During this time, the famed Ishtar Gate, one of the splendid entrances to the city, was dismantled and taken to Germany, where it remains. It is on view as part of a reconstruction in Berlin's Pergamon Museum. Meanwhile, at Babylon itself, a replica has been built in its place. I told you. In 1983, Saddam Hussein began a massive rebuilding effort in Babylon, restoring some of the site, but mostly building cheap new construction in imitation of it to create a tourist attraction. He built himself a modern palace right on top of some of the ruins and named it Saddam Hill. Like the ancient kings, he wrote his name on many of the bricks, with inscriptions such as, "This was built by Saddam, son of Nebuchadnezzar, to glorify Iraq." The project did more harm than good, as original materials were destroyed or clumsily restored, archaeologists say. In 2003, U.S. troops occupied the site, causing further damage to the archaeological record. Military vehicles crushed ancient pavements. Ouch, that hurts my soul. And soldiers pried mementos from the ruins. Today, only 2% of the city has been excavated. Let's see, this is Uruk, or how Uruk looks today. It talks about here that the walls were built by Gilgamesh, very, very famous king. And we've got a beautiful mosque entrance here, very colorful. This dude's jumping off a cliff. Okay, it's just a rock, so that's good. He's jumping into the river right there. Looked a lot more treacherous than it was at first. Let's read about Sinbad and the Sailor's 7 Journeys. Stories from 1001 Nights, also called the Arabian Nights, have their roots in ancient and medieval Arabic, Persian, Indian, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian folklore. They have been translated into many languages and made into films. One of the most popular characters from the collection is Sinbad the Sailor, who makes 7 journeys across land and sea, overcoming danger and disaster with wit and strength. Sinbad first leaves Baghdad in search of adventure and wealth. His ship lands on a beautiful island that resembles paradise, but turns out to be a sleeping fish. When the fish wakes up, all of the men except Sinbad escape on the ship. His crew presumes him dead, and Sinbad lives on an island with a king until he's able to return to his home. On a second journey, Sinbad is deserted on an island with giant birds, poisonous serpents, and magnificent diamonds. He escapes the perilous island with several large diamonds and becomes a wealthy man with the sale of the gems. On his third journey, Sinbad encounters vicious apes, an angry giant, an ogre, and a deadly serpent. Once again, he escapes unharmed, finds precious goods, and returns to Baghdad even wealthier. And so it goes, with Sinbad venturing forth through 4 more journeys that bring him to strange places, filled with fantastical creatures, dangers, and rewards. In the end, of course, Sinbad, like so many other mythic travelers, returns to Baghdad to stay, never going in search of adventure again. I don't know, I'd probably clock out after that first one with the fish, but anyway, playing some soccer there. And look at this beautiful bazaar. That is so fun. You get to go hang out like on the fountain. That's really fun. That must be nice in the summer. And fishing in the Shat al-Arab. Old school style, right? Let's see. It's prayer time. This little guy here is not quite sure what he's doing, but all the grown-ups around him does, right? New Year's Eve fireworks there. It's in Erbil. Wow, we've got, oh, let me see. This is, during Ashura, a Shiite Muslim holiday of mourning. So that's in commemoration of an imam. And some more prayer. This is during Eid al-Fitr. And this is during Eid al-Adha. Big prayer there. List of festivals there. We can skip that. Food. Here we go. There's some baklava, which is like one of my least favorite desserts. It's way too sweet. Too sweet for my teeth. Lots of spices and nuts and things for sale there. Table manners and social etiquette. Good to know if you're traveling, right? The Iraqis have very strict rules concerning table manners. Here are some things to do or to avoid when dining with Iraqis. It is offensive to use one's left hand when eating. For traditional reasons, the left hand is considered unclean. This is true in pretty much any Arab or Muslim-dominated country. It is considered proper for only one person to pay the bill in a restaurant. Iraqis are embarrassed by the Western custom of splitting the bill. Iraqis prepare a lot of food for parties or feasts. To be polite, the guests try to eat everything in front of them. It is not considered rude in Iraq to eat food quickly or without utensils. In fact, it is a sign to the host or hostess that the food is delicious. Iraqis are extremely offended if the family pet comes near the table during the meal. After eating, Iraqis lavishly praise the meal and the preparation of the food. When attending a meal prepared by someone else, an Iraqi will invariably bring a small gift to the host as a gesture of gratitude. There are other rules that are as important as proper table manners in everyday life. The following are some general rules of Iraqi etiquette. Iraqis shake hands when greeting. When a man and woman greet, the woman extends her hand first to indicate that she wants to shake hands. It is considered very rude to turn one's foot outward when talking to someone. Iraqis will be extremely offended if a person turns the sole of his or her foot toward them. That's good to know. I've done ballet my whole life, so I naturally stand with my feet out. It's always good to know if you're traveling to the Middle East. Don't do that. If an Iraqi gives someone a gift, it should be accepted with both hands and opened in the absence of the benefactor. Iraqi men stand when a woman enters the room and open doors for women. Both men and women stand when an older person enters or leaves the room. If someone admires an Iraqi's possession, such as a vase or small sculpture, the Iraqi will usually insist that the person take it. Therefore, it is proper etiquette to refrain from lavishly praising another's possessions. Making some fish there. I bet that turns out really good. And pouring some coffee. And buying some vegetables. Let's look at the recipes. One of my favorite parts of these books. We've got some casserole, meat and vegetables, and date cookies. Ooh, that sounds good. I'd gobble those up. There's a map of Iraq and where Iraq is located on this weird little map here. There it is. Alright, and that is it for tonight. Oop, there we go. Okay, I've got it. I've got the book. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, if you're still awake and you're still enjoying this content, please consider subscribing because I do these kind of books all the time. I'm going to actually do another book just like this later this week. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a very good